So we're talking about being made of non-self elements. So I, Neti, am made of everything other than Neti. There's no Neti that can make, Neti can't make herself. I can't make myself. There isn't a separate Neti that can make Neti each day. She's made up of all these other things. And of course, it's we can look at that. It fans out infinitely. But just one simple example is sort of waking up in the morning. I wake up in the morning, I kind of go through my day, just sort of like a quick mapping out before I get up for Zazen, just a quick kind of like, today's Wednesday, this is happening, that is happening, here's the breakdown of the day. It's sort of one of the first things I do before I get up. In a sense, I'm kind of inventing myself, but I'm not making myself, because it's all of those things that are making me. Like that I'm going to do Zazen in the morning. It's the Sangha and the fact that Zoom exists. And it exists because there's a billionaire in China, that the economic system there allowed it possible for that technology to have come to pass. And it got amplified because of COVID. And so, like, before I've even thought about one thing, the very first thing that I'm going to do Zazen, already the whole of the planet is implicated in a microsecond. So although my experience is that I wake up and I map out my day and I'm going to be the one moving through the day, on closer examination, it's all those other things that are not me that give me the appearance of my own existence. It's all those other things, and none of them are me in the conventional sense, that allow me to have the experience of my own existence. So although this teaching is the teaching of interdependence, it has this slightly different flavor of us being made of non-self elements. And it has implications for how we live in the world, which I will get to in a little bit. So another kind of very practical example is if we take a cake, a baked cake. That cake can't make itself. If we just take one little element, the cake is made with flour. And then if we think about flour, flour can't make itself either. Other things made flour. And just one example would be a grain of wheat, a grain. But that grain couldn't make itself either. It needed a rice plant. I mean, a grass, a type of grass, not rice, a type of grass for it to exist. And the grass couldn't make itself. It needed the soil, and so on. But what I like about this particular way of talking about interdependence is I think it can really cultivate a sense of gratitude, because we really get to see, if we look at it and let ourselves contemplate it, that we're made by everything else, and none of it is us. None of it is us. It's all these other things. But all of those things, they themselves didn't make themselves either. They themselves were made by other things. And those things that made them were made by other things. So this is the doctrine of no self. Now, this is anatta. Not only did I not make myself, the things that made me didn't make themselves either. And we can't find anything that can make itself. We can't find a discrete building block that makes things. Everything is exists because of everything else. It's this huge kind of gift that is going on, this huge sort of paying it forward that's just going on constantly. And in the Diamond Sutra, it talks about 4 different notions that it is good to let go of. And the first of those 4 is the notion of self. And one way that we can begin to let go of the notion of self is this teaching of we are made of things other than ourselves. We're made of things other than ourselves. We can just let that phrase, like while you're driving your car or while you're doing dishes or while you're lying in bed, you can just let that phrase come in. I'm made of everything other than myself. And then it's fine to spend some time just going through the list. Of course, you can't get to the end of the list. But you can just kind of go through the list a little bit. I'm made of everything not other than myself. And it can help us to really, in our bones, see this truth, the no self truth, which is not to say, of course, that conventionally there isn't a self. Conventionally there is, but this conventional self is actually made of non-self elements. So they're sort of 2 truths. They function a bit like 2 truths. The truth that I'm a self, the way that functions is that I have to remember to drink water and to eat food and to get sleep and to have a social life of some sort and to engage my intellect and exercise my body and all of those things, have appropriate boundaries when that situation arises. So that's the practical, functional side of self. But that self actually still is made of everything other than itself. So we still look after the self, but we practice through contemplation, active contemplation that you can do just during the day when your mind is not too, isn't needed. Often when we're doing things with our body but don't need to use our brain too much, we can just contemplate and just take a line like that. I'm made of everything other than myself, while we're putting gas in the car, any place, while we're getting dressed. So another one of the 4 notions in the Diamond Sutra, besides the notion of the self to let go of, is the notion of being a human. Oh, hey. I'm just doing a call. Because being a human, just like the self, the human, we're only human because of all the other species. We're only a human because we evolved from other species and because we need them. And so in the same way, we can see that each species doesn't make itself. Every plant, every animal is made by everything other than itself. And it's good just to think about these things. It helps us to, in a way, not feel isolated. Well, not in a way. It helps us to not feel isolated. It helps us to see how dependent we are on everything and how fortunate we are to be able to be, to exist through the kindness of others. And then another notion is the notion of being like a sentient being. And I particularly like this teaching that for us to be a living being, a conscious being, requires all of the beings, all of the non-sentient beings. For me to be alive requires, it requires rocks and it requires clouds. For me to be alive requires rocks and clouds. So we should be bowing continually to rocks and clouds. And all through our day, we should just be bowing in our minds to everything in our minds. And to computers, as someone just commented, to everything. That's the thing, the bowing to non-sentient beings really helps us to actually appreciate incredibly mundane things, like microwaves or anything, doesn't matter. We can bow to it and be grateful for its existence. And on that point, actually, of non-sentient beings making it possible for us to exist, is that because this web is completely inseparable, we can't track the relationships, but there's nothing that lies outside these relationships, then we can also actually not have ill feeling even to things like poison or milk that's gone off in the fridge, or anything that you might have a tendency to have aversion to, a spider for some people. That if we can see that our existence is dependent upon their existence and their existence is dependent upon ours. We might not be able to make a very clear line between their existence being dependent upon ours, but actually, because there's no break in this web, it's actually true. So we can then cultivate this sense of connectedness to everything, even things that feel very foreign or unpleasant in our minds. It's always this in our minds. What we do with our body is a little bit different. Like, we don't drink the off milk. That would not be a good idea. But we don't need to feel aversion to it in our minds. We can just go, the milk is bad. It's very important to kind of cultivate this sense of connectedness to everything. And then the last of these notions to let go of is the notion of a lifespan. So the notion of a finite life. This is interesting to contemplate too, that conventionally we have this idea that the world exists and we come into it and we're here for a period of time and then we exit out of it. And there's truth to that, of course. But another way to think about it is that those 2 points, the birth and the death points, are really just, they're like very powerful punctuations. Like, they're very powerful, intense punctuation points, but they're not essentially different to any other point. They're just a much more visceral for us. But they're not really essentially different to the rising and falling moment by moment of our own existence. They do feel very different, and it's important to acknowledge that. But when we think of ourselves as made as of non-self elements, then we can say all that's happening is we're going from a kind of a non-conscious element into conscious element at birth. And then we're like that for a period of time, and then we return in some ways into a non-conscious element. But I like to think about how when someone passes away, how much of their energy ends up going into each of us, the people who knew that person. How much of that energy actually goes into us Like I notice how much I'm like my father as the years go on. I seem to develop more of his characteristics. And people we love, we take on that energy. It doesn't disappear. It just shifts across into other people. So the energy continues on in a less concentrated form, in a slightly more dispersed way. And the physical body is also becomes more dispersed. It kind of goes back. It goes back into the ocean of elements. I wanted to share a koan. Many of you will know this one very well, but I like this longer version. This is a slightly longer version. This is case 37 in the Mumonkan, Zhao Zhou's The Oak Tree in the Courtyard. A monk asked Zhao Zhou, "What is the meaning of Bodhidharma's coming from the west?" Zhao Zhou said, "The oak tree in the courtyard." But what I really like is the longer version where the monk then says, "Please don't teach me with reference to outside things." And Zhao Zhou says, "I don't teach you with reference to outside things." I don't teach you with reference to outside things. How could the oak tree in the courtyard possibly be an outside thing? How could it possibly be an outside thing? The oak tree in the courtyard is the reason I exist. And the reason it exists is because I exist. I don't teach in reference to outside things. I love that line so much. And then the monk says, "What is the meaning of Bodhidharma's coming from the west?" The oak tree in the courtyard. I don't teach in reference to outside things. There's no outside things. So the effect of this sort of contemplation, which we can contemplate for years and years and years, the effect of this contemplation is it makes it sort of impossible. Maybe we can have little relapses, but it makes it sort of impossible to be lonely. Because all we need to do is just lift up our eyes, and there is everything that's creating our existence. So maybe just because we are human, maybe we do feel some loneliness, but less. This teaching can help us feel less lonely, less separate, less isolated, less likely to have thoughts of superiority or inferiority, because it doesn't make sense. If you make me and I make you, what madness to say I'm better than you or I'm worse than you. Kind of madness. And we feel more gratitude. We feel more intimacy. We feel more unified. And that feeling is more accurate because that's how it is. So it's more accurate. And I think when we are more accurate in our understanding, and we can never be completely accurate, nobody knows, but when we are more accurate, more in accord with how reality is, there is a natural kind of lightness of spirit that comes with that. There is a lightness of spirit that comes with that. So that's what I wanted to share with you today, that we are made of non-self elements. It's just it's a very joyful contemplation. Yeah. Would anyone like to comment, share your thoughts on this, or or ask a question. Yes, Kevin.
Hello. I enjoyed your teaching so much the last time. I have thought about it many times, how you simply said Zazen changes us, and that assurance that I'm not wasting my time. The two things that came to me, I remember Robert Aitken, when asked the question that the Buddha would not answer either about what happened when we died, he, when pressed, said, he thought his skandhas scattered, and that was the end of it. And I like that, and I always thought it was charming and not stupid, because lots of references to death are kind of insipid, but that was modest and beautiful, and just their tendencies go into the void. Who knows what becomes of them? And I remember John Muir, when you were speaking, whose famous quote in the 19th century, whenever you pick up a rock, it's attached to everything else in the universe. And I just enjoyed so much you reminding us that we are made of stardust, and that nobody made me, and that my parents made me. They just passed on the DNA, and that when I'm walking on that floor to heat my tea in the microwave that you mentioned, the floor is pressing up against my feet, letting me enjoy gravity. So thank you very much for reminding me of the miracle of existence.
Yeah, and I think particularly why I like this teaching is that it has no end. So when you say like the floor makes it possible for me to function with gravity, then we can also think that the floor is made of non-self elements too, and even the stardust. Like there's just no end.
Turtles all the way down.
Turtles all the way down. That's a nice memory, Bill.
Oh, thank you, Neti. Gosh darn, you just exploded my existence. So I can helping me to better, let me say this first, like disassemble myself and reassemble whatever myself is with everything around me. I've been for the last, and I'm really enjoying it, contemplating the 10,000 things. And you've just, it's like you've just given it a huge boost tonight to add that to my my meditations, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm not actually sure exactly where the first time this teaching is written about, but I imagine it's in the Pali Canon. Someone here might know. I just know it just as that. We are made of non-self elements, but it's probably in the Pali Canon somewhere. Yeah.
I feel like it comes out in a bunch of the sutras, and I definitely, it's in the Diamond Sutra. I put the 4 notions in the chat if people want to kind of write them down or copy them into their world. Sorry, Heather, I didn't mean to distract from you.
No worries. Thank you for your talk, Neti. I really like that perspective on interdependence. It's not one that I've heard before. And it seems to me inarguably true that self is made of non-self elements. And as I was listening, I couldn't help but think of, I don't know, I guess it's a sort of a quote, and maybe I'm just paraphrasing it, but it's something that's sort of from a more mundane level that's maybe from the motivational realm. I'm just thinking of this quote that goes something like this. We are not made of our circumstances, but of our choices. Or I am not made of my circumstances, but of my choices. And that made me think of the 5 remembrances. I am of the nature to grow old. There's no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death, etc. And then the final one, my actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. So that made me think of the question, is my karma who I am or what I have?
Yeah. Well, an interesting thing. I'm glad that you mentioned this about karma, because although this teaching, I'm made of everything other than myself, is to help us not identify with our own thoughts and our own experiences and our own opinions and so on, to help us soften our relationship to that. At the same time, and this is what's so beautiful I find about the Buddhist teachings, is at the same time, we do take responsibility for our actions. So when it's appropriate in terms of wanting to be of benefit to the world, we say, it's my fault. I'm so sorry. I will take responsibility for that. You know, it's my responsibility to not do harm. So we do sort of have a sense of me when it comes to ethics.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to do the no self thing around ethics.
Right.
And this is one of the faults, of course, that this is the shadow side of no self. The shadow side of that teaching is people feeling they can do whatever they want. But of course, that's a mistaken view. So we have a very clear sense of self when it comes to ethics. But even within that, then we can say, the fact that I made a mistake, the fact that I did do harm, is because of all the karmic conditions, everything in the past, all the forces that other than myself that brought me into existence. You know, so we can also be forgiving and gentle with ourselves when we do make mistakes, but we also take responsibility. And this is the two truths teachings. We never want to tip one side and forget the other. I like to think of it as being on a motorbike. When you on a motorbike and you go around a bend, you appropriately tip in a certain direction to go around a bend, and then you straighten up, and then you tip another way. So you tip whichever way is appropriate. Tip towards no self, tip towards self. It's my responsibility. Tip towards no self. I feel so much gratitude that I'm able to exist. So it's just like that.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you mentioned the two truths. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Neti, just to be a little pokey, since we're just a chain of ongoing causes, or maybe we're not, where do cause and effect complete each other?
Where do they complete each other? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah. So is there a place in our practice where there's room for the uncaused to come in, for something that isn't just the chain of reaction? Is there a room?
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of like to use now as a good example, that in one way you can say the only thing there is now, like the only thing there is here and now. One can kind of see that past and the future don't exist. There doesn't exist. There's nobody that's there. Everybody is, wherever they are is here for everybody. And then from Nagarjuna's perspective, you can't locate now anywhere, and you can't locate here either. So you just can't locate here or now. And so it's kind of like that. Everything is causes and conditions, and you can't actually locate a cause or a condition or a result. Can't kind of locate them either. So we just walk this kind of unknowable reality between something is and something isn't. And what I like about that is I don't need to try and land. I don't need to try and land. I just tip like on my motorbike. Tip on. Now is the only thing there is. Tip on. Can't even find now. I have no idea whatsoever. Causes and conditions. What cause? Where's the condition? Where's the result? I can't find it. You know.
And it seems it also points that if that's the way that we hold it, that now's where a practice moment can emerge. And now's where you can do some of that, engaging in the karmic stream to transform it, but also engaging in the karmic stream to let it be uncaused, to not hold it and have it just flow. Does that feel?
Yeah.
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 Cause and effect are a mistaken view, because everything has a multitude of causes. We're involved in a web of everything. And so there are no specific causes and effects. It's just an illusion.
Well, that's one of the truths. That's one of them. And then the other one is, you know, you fall over and you get a bruise on your leg. Yeah. So we just keep the two together. And I think that's exactly what skillfulness is knowing which way to tilt within those two truths. And of course, those two truths are just concepts that we use. There's the trees don't think about two truths. They're not fussed about it at all. But for humans, we need language. And so this is one way we talk about it with language. Yeah. I'm a little aware that I've left my 5-year-old grandson to take care of himself. I think I might need to go and attend to him in a few minutes. I tried to set him up with Spotify and it just didn't work. So we couldn't get it to work.
Being in the chain of dependent origination, bodhisattva action, is some 5-year-old playtime, which sounds freaking lovely.
But so much more skillful than a chainsaw. Good call.
Yes, yes. Maybe not the best babysitting technique to give them a chainsaw. Maybe at 5, there might be an age. Could we give Reverend Neti a bow? In Neti, you gave us a call to kind of practice this, and so I'll just repeat that call. That these kind of 4 ways to kind of practice with your life or stuff are things that you can use as you're moving through your week next week, and I'd really invite you to play with them. They're deep and they're worthy, and they seem to open up a quiet, loving presence inside of me whenever I do anything like them. Do you want to add any final words before we shift?
No, it's just really good to see you all. And thank you so much for the prompt, Mike. It was really good.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll sign out now.
Thank you.